Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Should we go ahead and get started?
Sounds good. Looks like it's 5 minutes after.
Yep.
Cool. Should we start off maybe with the spec sig update? Yeah, so I think right now everybody is pretty interested in getting this V03 spec kind of finalized as much as possible. So a big milestone happened, I guess, last week. We merged OTEP 66, which is the context prop OTEP. So the OTEP is just like halfway there. I guess we actually need to kind of write all the actual specs and get official words into the spec repo. So that stuff is in progress. There have been some updates to named tracer and named meter. Yeah, I mean, there's some PRs. You can look through them. A lot of it's just kind of clarifying information. One thing I noticed by kind of looking through there is that these were called like tracer factory and meter factory, and they're calling them tracer provider and meter provider. It's more of a language agnostic way of referring to these things. So my guess is at some point we might want to follow suit. I've at least heard some disgruntlement about having the name factory in our code base. So I think another thing that happened, yeah, okay. So for metrics, the meter name is now equivalent to a namespace for a metric. And I think I'm not fully metric aware yet, but I've been listening to a lot of the conversations, and I think one of the concerns was that a number of libraries will record a metric called like latency, and without a namespace, you will end up with like 10 different metrics called latency, and they will possibly even roll up together and they don't represent the same thing, or they won't roll up together, but you just won't know which one is which. So having things namespace prevents these kind of name collisions for metric names that are going to be pretty common, but they kind of get scoped based on that name. There's a pull request out there for RPC semantic conventions. So this is really just kind of defining the expected attributes for an RPC. So something to be aware of if on the instrumentation front. I think there's a comment from Tristan about the library resource. So I think the issue here is that resources are maybe only in the SDK and not the API. And as a result, exporters are SDK specific, I guess.
That's really always been true because the actual internal data format is relevant to exporters, and we removed the definition of span data a long time ago. So there's really no representation that we can guarantee to exporters across different implementations of the SDK.
All right, yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think there's a bullet point here, span structure goes in the SDK. And I think that's what that is mentioning. So that all makes sense to me. I guess you could envision some way to have some massaging layer before you got to the exporter. But I think for efficiency purposes, what we have is probably what we want. There was another issue about the project timeline and milestones. basically there is an issue that specifies what the milestones are, what should be in each one, and they're like woefully out of date, like so many other things. So there was a request that, hey, maybe we should update this and make it look a little bit more like reality, just for people's sanity. I think there are a lot of people who are like working on this stuff. They want to have support. They want to be ready to go live when we're ready to go live, but like nobody knows when that is. I don't think, regardless of whatever goes on the update of that page is still going to be wrong, but it will be, wrong in a slightly different way. It's just the way things go. So on that note, other things that are woefully inaccurate are READMEs across OpenTelemetry. We also kind of have our own kind of deadlines and expectations around stuff. So some of you might have seen that I opened a PR that just kind of updated our table a little bit to reflect when some things went out, and just kind of guessing at where things are going. Let's see, there's a proposal to remove the gauge instrument, and I don't know all the reasoning behind it, but initially, I think it might have to do with an observer. There's an observer metric of some kind that might be a suitable replacement. I don't really know. What I do know is I think Josh McDonald was initially kind of against it, but I feel like he's kind of coming around and maybe even in favor of making this change, possibly. Yeah, so that might be worth a read. There was a spec triage party this morning before this meeting. So yeah, fun fact, I am basically in meetings until 2 p.m. today, just like straight. I might be able to like squeeze in a lunch if I'm lucky, but post lunch, I have to give a demo in one of these meetings. So I don't know if you can ever be too prepared for one of those. But this is my problem, not yours. And yeah, that's basically what happened at the Spec SIG. I think there is going to be another Spec triage party Friday morning if you like waking up early on a Friday. And the whole purpose of those things is they're just like endless issues. I think we're at least like 4 pages of issues on the Spec repo. And I think we made it through like 1 page today, which is good. And we're just trying to burn those things down and get this V03 kind of nailed down, and then kind of know what we need to do for V04. So yeah, and I guess on a related note, like one thing that kind of came up, I think, Dave, you asked about this in your rack PRs, like what do you do about errors? And I mentioned, hey, there's some semantic conventions for those. Let me just pull those up. And then as I went to dig them up, I'm like, where are the semantic conventions for errors? So they disappeared. And I know they were there because we originally copied over like the open tracing ones. The open tracing ones had semantic conventions for what they call logs, which are events in OpenTelemetry. So they had standard names and then standard attribute names for them. But yeah, it turns out there's problems, or there's bigger problems that led to that stuff getting removed. There is this guy, Kevin Brockhoff, who has an OTEP opened about some of these things, and he wants kind of typed events, a special event type for errors. And I think maybe that's going to be necessary just because of, well, probably mainly like stack trace. Stack trace is a thing that doesn't neatly fit into current attribute definitions. Although, oh, here's the landscaper. He's late. Yeah, I had a thought before that. Oh yeah, my thought was, I thought I saw something come through that we support array valued attributes now, and maybe that could be like a way out for like your stack trace. It's a thought. I don't know if it's a good one.
Yeah, the array valued thing was added. Well, the example that I used to motivate that was memcache multigets, where you want to include all of the keys as an attribute. And otherwise you need some kind of semantic conventions around like, how do you group these things? Do you, comma separate them, or what do you do? So array valued attributes was a fix to that. And yeah, I think that could be leveraged for stack traces as well. Stack trace support has been removed from the Open Telemetry protocol. So.
Yeah. So that just occurred to me. So I might propose that in some way, or at least try to get in touch with this guy Kevin, who has been kind of leading the charge on this stuff, and just kind of say, hey, maybe this is like an easier way around it. I think, yeah, I forget. I know attributes have like a length limit of like 256 characters or something like that, 255, one of those numbers. Do we have, is the array, the limits on an array more, are those relaxed, more generous?
I'm not sure. I'll need to go back and read the spec.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't even know if the spec was updated for that,
but yeah, I think the whole point of saying that is, I've at least realized that errors are a thing that are missing, and I feel like we really can't have a 1.0 without them. At least that's my take. Like I almost feel like, users of telemetry, if you gave them a choice, it's like, we can give you like your traces, or we can give you your errors. Like, people might pick the errors over the traces. They're just that important to people. But I think the real answer is everybody wants it all. So we should have it all.
Well, we've certainly talked about, conditionally doing things, and we could, now that our instrumentation has config, you certainly could say, trace errors or return errors, or something like that, and have a convention saying, if you do that, we'll fire up some error handling or something like that and return it for you. I could see that being useful. Is that typical in an instrumentation library? I mean, the Datadog stuff has a lot of switches, right? You can throw a lot of switches and say, turn off distributed stuff and do that. So I just don't know how easy it would be to do.
Errors is something always seen, people always want. People always want to know if there's an exception somewhere.
So there's all this stuff about status, right? For a span can have a status, and there's the status canonical codes that are in the spec.
Yeah, there is that, and there's kind of this whole discussion about how that doesn't fit all use cases, but I think the status can help indicate that something went wrong, which is great, but we need to find ways to like, document exactly what happened, preferably like in the error class, the error message, and a stack trace of the thing that went wrong. But yeah, span.status being that enumeration of gRPC codes, I think is another swamp of sorts. Yeah, I think we do need to try to smooth that stuff out as much as possible, though. So yeah, I guess for now, for instrumentation, I don't know exactly what to recommend other than we should totally have to-dos about this. We should definitely, anything that is like anything you see in the Datadog code where there's like a rescue clause and there is, documenting the error on the span, I would say keep the clause and just add a to-do. We need to document this error when semantic conventions come. And that way we don't miss something and it'll be easy to kind of fill in the blanks when that stuff comes around. At least that's the idea I have off the top of my head right now. Anybody have any other suggestions on how we should handle that for the time being? Cool. Maybe we can add that to the Datadog reporting guide for now. That's also in draft.
Okay, so just for now, set the status, leave it to do, and
yeah,
just pause.
Probably leave in whatever rescues, add a to do,
Okay.
Google cop disabled style, something next to it probably, for your empty clause.
Okay.
Yeah, so on that note, I guess, yeah, any questions over all that rambling from Spec, SpecSig, and the other tangents that I ended up wandering down?
Is there a sense of when things like the Open Telemetry protocol are going to be nailed down? I just took a look right now, and the protos don't include array valued attributes, for example.
That's a good question. I haven't heard much about it, but yeah, given that these array valued attributes are an interesting thing, I think maybe it's worth a bullet point on the next SpecSig meeting to bring it up and kind of get an update there. Yeah, my guess is that like everything else, we're all kind of working on these moving targets, and we're doing the best we can to keep up with them, but sometimes things slip through the cracks. So we'll see if that is one of these things or not. Make a note about this. Cool. Should we move on to talk about our open PRs?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So yesterday I merged this PR for the instrumentation installer. Thanks for all the reviews on that. And then I opened another PR for preliminary SDK config. I kind of had this other draft SDK config, and it was like configure all of these things, some of which don't yet exist. And then I kind of pared it down to the things that actually exist, because I feel like this is kind of like the loose end from the auto instrumentation stuff. So this is how you kind of can interact with that and install the instrumentation. So I think Francis already left a handful of comments here, and they were pretty good ones. Like, should we be able to set the tracer factory? And as I thought about that, I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, actually. I think, like, if you're using the default SDK, you're going to use the tracer factory from that SDK. So we should, I can't imagine a use case where you wouldn't want to do that, and I'm not going to try to. And I think we should not allow this. And if some use case does become apparent, like, we can always make that change later. But I feel like, for the most part, I think that's a pretty good policy, is like, if we aren't really aware of any use cases for stuff, just kind of go the Yagni route. It's always easy to add stuff. It's impossible. It's nearly impossible to remove stuff once you put it in. So, so yeah, I will go through and address that stuff, but I feel like that this will help out a lot for people trying to, like, demo open telemetry, and now that we have instrumentation coming in, like, actually installing it and getting that working. So it kind of can help, it can help prevent that 10 lines of boilerplate that you have to have ahead of all your examples. Yeah. It'll come with defaults for everything, and then you can just specify what you need.
Yeah, the examples are basically going to become the OpenTelemetry SDK configure, use whatever your new instrumentation is.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that should make people happy, hopefully. Let's see. There is, speaking of instrumentation, there is some more instrumentation PRs that came in. It looks like Grant, a new contributor, I think, is he with you all, Mutations?
One of us. Yeah, he's one of us.
All right, another mutant. I haven't had a chance to look through that, but.
We were like, hey, you want to do one of these? All sure. Bing. Like, okay. I think we all expected maybe to take a look at it before it showed up as a PR, but we'll just look at it out there in the open, so no big deal.
Cool. So that's probably worth some eyes at some point. And then there's a draft for rack instrumentation. I think a few of us have left some comments there. In general, I think I had a lot of comments about trying to, like, not repeatedly create strings and other things. So I think, yeah, I think it's worth just kind of like mentioning this, and maybe even documenting this in the porting guide, that instrumentation should strive to minimize object allocations as much as possible. And yeah, like, I guess it is like a different mindset, like, writing instrumentation. And I'm thinking back from when I transitioned, like, into this monitoring and observability field, from just kind of being like a Ruby developer. And it did take kind of like this mental shift, and I felt like in many ways, like, the Ruby that I ended up having to write in the monitoring world, it wasn't as beautiful and it wasn't as nice and concise. Like, it was sometimes ugly and crappy, but with good reason. So I think, yeah, I think ultimately I became, like, a little bit more disappointed in Ruby itself, which I think is a true sign of actually just getting more under the hood with a lot of stuff. It's like, I don't know. I feel like
But
everything
Matt,
exposes
they were working on garbage collection like 10 years behind every other major language implementation. I don't know what your problem is.
Hey, we have generational GC these days, which is nice.
I guess
Wasn't that invented in 1984?
I guess Al Francis. No, yeah, I mean, the story gets better every Ruby, but it's still, brutality when it comes to just stuff showing up and slamming on the heap and the objects you've got to garbage collect and all that stuff. So it's a sign of growth, Matt.
No, I think this is fine with everything. I think everything like exposes these nice APIs. It's like every, I don't know, like website you go to, like your banking website, like it looks nice and trustworthy on the surface, but like I don't want to know what's going on like behind it because it's probably like some mainframe from 1984.
I had a similar Ruby awakening. I was writing multi-threaded XML parsing running on JRuby, and because of the observability tools on that runtime, I was just watching the Ruby heap go. So yes, I've had the very similar, like, what am I doing? And then I had one of my friends, as a Java programmer, introduced me to the idea of back pressure. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. So this is the thing that happens. Like, if you are regularly creating a lot of garbage, you end up with ultimately a larger kind of standing heap size, and like users tend to notice this. You have like a lot of people, they're really trying to maximize their instances. So, people who are using like cloud providers or whatever, like if they run their app without your tool and then they add your tool, like sometimes it bumps up the memory usage, like on Heroku or something, and their instances just start getting like killed. And
right, I've had some heap fragmentation issues in a couple of years ago, and so I revisited those. I found a really nice blog. So basically, the Ruby runtime just isn't releasing memory back to the OS is one of the main problems, and there's like a really easy fix apparently that needs to be broadcast to everybody. Like, hey, this joyful bike shedding, what's his name? Hong Li Lai. I watched that yesterday. He did a really
is he from
great analysis. Fusion.
The web, the Fusion web server, right?
Yeah. So it's like, hey, you guys are missing one line. It seems like free, and I didn't catch the technical solution to it, but basically it's like, hey, just free the memory back to the OS so it can reallocate a page of heap back to that.
Dave, you're going to need to start printing out some free memory, Ruby free Ruby memory shirts or something like that, so we can get the groundswell of support, and people can change their social media account badges, and then I think we'll probably get some traction.
Yeah, I would hope that if it is this one line missing, that it has maybe made it into more recent Rubies. If not, I don't know, somebody needs to open a PR to Ruby to add that in. But yeah, like I know there are those other issues, such as just like heap fragmentation, and if pages are not completely empty, if there's a single object on them, they will never ever get freed unless the object is removed from the page. So that's
right. That definitely wasn't top of mind. That you rocked my world yesterday, and and I think Ruby. I didn't typically think, oh, performance optimization. So it's like, oh, shift. Yeah, you're totally right on. Having to shift. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. There's definitely a shift, and I feel like that shift in me created a little bit of sadness initially, but like I eventually got over it, and I'm still working in Ruby. So there's that. But yeah, so pulling things back around. Let's see, we got like 20 minutes-ish. Yeah, all right, rack instrumentation. I feel like there was one other thing that I at least kind of made a comment on that that was applicable, and that is right now we're kind of we're passing config to adapters as hashes, and I think this is like a really pragmatic way to do stuff right now. I think longer term, having a slightly more sophisticated config object might not be a bad idea. And I think it should be able to be initialized from a hash. But I think Datadog has a pretty interesting config class where you can kind of specify, you know, the name of a thing, like a type for it. And maybe it would be nice if you could even like specify like a coercion for a thing. So like if you expect something to be an array, but somebody might want to give you a single value or an array, it might be nice to be able to kind of document that this thing is it should be coerced to an array no matter what you get. So like if the input hash has a single value, the config will always kind of arrayify it for you, and you can rely on the thing being what you expect. So I think this is like overkill for now. I think this might be like a 1.0 or post 1.0 feature, but like I do think that this is a thing that instrumentation is going to have to probably deal with right now, and it's going to have to kind of, you know, manually massage the config hash. But maybe we should keep tabs on that and see if it makes sense to have a more rich config object that can be initialized with a hash, but kind of do some coercions and validations for you or something. And I think, you know, prior art for that would be like looking at DD trace and seeing what they're doing there, because I think that's something interesting. And I think OpenCensus as well had a pretty decent config system as well that would be worth looking at. And yeah, when we run out of other things to do, I think this could be something that we could add in that might improve the experience a little bit. It's a thought.
What are our feelings about runtime dependencies, just in terms of, you know, taking some very well-established, you know, configuration library that does these things for us, or other kinds of things? Are we generally against that because we don't want to drag along a bunch of extra baggage?
I am anti-runtime dependency myself. So I think it's a good rule of thumb to avoid them unless they're absolutely necessary.
Okay, yeah, I think there's in terms of inspiration then, I don't know if you've looked at any of the dry RB gems or the way those folks write stuff, but they have a gem called dry configurable, which is really nice, and probably has some of the internal guts that are battle tested. So even if we wanted to, you know, internalize some of that work, we could do that. But that might be, you know, when we're looking at it, sometimes I worry, you know, when we're doing that, we end up with kind of our half-baked version of a thing. Not us, but anytime I say, oh, you know what, I can't bring in that gem because it's got the stuff, then I try and do it myself. I'm like, yeah, okay. So anyways, just if we're looking for inspiration, it is open source. It is something that that's been around for a while, so that might be worth taking a little inspiration from.
Yeah, that all sounds good. I've looked at those libraries. I haven't used them extensively, but yeah, like I know the folks behind all that ROM, dry RB.
Yeah.
They're
those guys, yeah.
They're really great Rubyists, so I have no doubt that they are of supremely high quality. So, and I don't know. I think runtime dependencies, in general, we should really try to avoid them, but I think
Gotcha.
Stuff is up to debate though, and I don't think I am like the last word on any of this stuff. So yeah, I'm throwing that out there as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you looked at them. It's something I always think about when I find myself going, I want to, maybe I'll just use everything. Like you, I've been following Solnik and stuff for years and years and watching all the ROM stuff and everything. So I think pretty highly of this stuff, but I totally understand.
Cool. All right. So, all right, yeah. So I mentioned release schedule. I opened a PR for that as well. So let's see. What is the thing that might be done sooner than February 24th? Correlation context.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So does that mean this mammoth context prop PR that I have opened, we think we can get in before, so sometime in the next month?
I hope so.
Okay, I also hope so. I also understand that this thing is ridiculous, and we definitely need to, yeah, I think whatever I can do to help out, like getting this stuff through, and definitely I appreciate the comments that have come in so far, and I understand it's just kind of like this iterative process of like chipping into the problem and understanding like what exactly has happened. So, so yeah, I don't know, maybe I can optimistically move that to like February 10th or something on this PR. I will optimistically move it to something that's like 2 weeks out, just to see like if that actually, might throw that date out into the ether and make it a reality.
Yeah, I guess one of the questions is whether that date represents the like alpha 0.3 release, in which case like all those dates are going to be aligned, or if we're just going to release that functionality without necessarily cutting a new version of the gen.
All right, let's just leave these all February 24th. And I think we'll just kind of assume that this is the next release and that this is what we've targeted for the next release. And when it kind of comes down to this point where we feel like we have enough stuff that we should get something out there, we can either bump something or not. But yeah, I guess we'll stick with February 24th, but I'm still going to throw out February 10th or something into the ether, just so it's there, feel it, and maybe we can find some way to work through this gigantic PR. So speaking of gigantic PR, is there anything else we should talk about? Should we talk about that for a little bit? If there's something else we should talk about, maybe we should talk about it before jumping in.
Dave, what's your feeling about taking the rack PR out of draft and making it a real boy?
So I was going to adopt those proposals that Matt had, the performance optimization ones.
Stuff. Okay.
And then there were, I thought there were a couple more to-dos besides the error handling. I'll have to take a second look and see if there was another big piece we were missing.
Okay.
I don't know those off the top of my head. I have to take a look. But I think the error handling was the big one that I had a question on. and then we can bring that out of draft.
Cool.
Let's see, to do. I had a note as well. Let's see, set error, set attribute. Span type of proxy, does that ring a bell? Span kind of proxy? Do we have anything like that?
I don't think we have that as a span kind or a supported span kind at the moment.
Okay. And then I'm assuming, so Datadog has this thing of URL quantization that I was not going to attempt to implement at this time, but that might be worth noting.
Yeah, there's I forget, an OTEP or a Spec PR from URI about reducing cardinality of operation names. So that may be relevant here. Yeah, provide guidelines for low cardinality span names. Yeah, let's see. It might be worth taking a read through this. Sorry, I'll just add that here.
Okay, I think that's all I saw in there. So a couple of notes and to-dos. I think I only saw the my mind just frizzed. Quantization and two of the adapter, 2 or 3 of the adapters was only in a couple of places, but this was one of them. Trying to strip off the param values and just leave the query param names on the URL. So I didn't know if that would be an operation of an exporter or some other piece in the pipeline, or whether the adapter's responsibility would be the quantization span.
Yeah, we were talking about that. It was like we've seen Dave was showing some of the traffic that Datadog's had recently to they make some decisions, you know, because they care about what's going to their back end, so they're pretty opinionated about what they're going to send. And Matt and Francis, my opinion was just we can't do that necessarily, because we're kind of agnostic in terms of that, but that might be that rich configuration you're talking about, Matt, where it's like we could make some decisions, or you could say, you know, give us a method or something to filter the headers, or, you know, give us the rules by which you want us to do that, or, you know, but it almost feels like if we're going to do the header stuff, send everything for now, and then work on reducing that later, or provide configurability to, you know, or just pick a few that we're going to do and let that sort of grow from people using it, as opposed to trying to take some really opinionated approaches to that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think we either need to adopt the semantic conventions and support that in some way, or we need to leave it configurable. In my experience, I've used quite a few different backends at scale, and every time I've tried a new one, I've had to go and adjust instrumentation or do some kind of mapping in the collection pipeline
Right.
Because every backend has different expectations, slightly different expectations about what you're sending, what their cardinality limits are, things like that.
Right, I was going to say, and even how they handle the cardinality, right? It's just there's
Yeah.
going to be real big differences. Okay.
Yeah.
So, is this URL quantization, is that used for deriving the span name? Because I think span names are something that should definitely be low cardinality. And
I thought it was data they were sending along with the span, Dave. But now that you asked that question, Matt, I don't recall. I think I got preoccupied with their preoccupation with the word quantization.
that's something to preoccupy yourself with for sure.
Yeah, I mean, URI's proposed spec update has a bunch to say about HTTP span names. And how the cardinality of those might be reduced.
Yeah, so this is bull 416 on the spec.
Yeah, so instrumentation must not default to using URI path as span name, but may provide hooks to allow custom logic to override the default span name. So that suggests like maybe having some configurability mechanism.
Yeah, I think it suggests not having a configurability, or probably having a configurability mechanism, but also ensuring that the default name out of the box is not going to be high cardinality. I feel this is another guideline that should make it into the converting instrumentation doc.
Yeah, the suggestion is HTTP client spans should be using conservative low cardinality names formed from available parameters of an HTTP request, such as the HTTP method name. So it's kind of like the default is ultra conservative, and then provide configuration hooks to use slightly less conservative names if you want to.
Yeah, so that hook might be, provide us a proc, and you get the URL name, we give you the full one, and you just return us what you want us to use. And, your backend will figure it out, hopefully. All right, so we have 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and I think the community meeting starts right after this one, and I'm not sure if it uses the same Zoom, but I expect a bunch of people will start hopping on here soon.
Paolo has just shown up, so yeah.
So there we go.
Okay.
Confirmed. The community will be dropping in 4 minutes. I guess there are 2 things on my mind that I will throw out there, and one is I am curious, what people would think about possibly moving this meeting to absolutely any other time slot than this one. Like Tuesday or Thursday at this time would work. Maybe people can just think about this, and maybe next week I can make a doodle of what times people can make it. And if we can all agree on another time to move this, and there is a free Zoom link during that time, maybe we can do that. And the whole reason behind this is I'm kind of interested in participating in the JavaScript SIG a little bit, but they're kind of at the same time. So it's cramping my style there.
Yeah.
We call that divided loyalties, Matt.
Indeed. My loyalties will always be here, but
but we'll be the ones who move. I get it.
well, I feel like
I'm totally kidding. For me, any day of the week at this time is fine.
cool. So maybe I will make a doodle, and either I could, yeah, I will make a doodle, and we can talk about this at the next meeting. It will be at the same time, and then we'll see if there's something that's convenient. But I really hope that like we can find something convenient. I wouldn't want to move it if it would mean that people that have been attending can't attend anymore. So
Yeah, there are rooms available both at this time on both Tuesday and Thursday. So
cool. So I will make that doodle. And I guess we only have 2 minutes left. There's really not enough time to go into this context prop stuff. But I guess we can think about it over the next week. Like I'll keep addressing feedback from that as I have time, and we can solve stuff over the PR. But if it's looking like maybe we need to dedicate some time to it, we could consider like trying to do like a working session or something where we kind of hammer things out a little bit more. And if all of that fails, like I am hesitant to suggest this, but I will just throw it out there. It's like we could think about trying to chop that PR up into chunks. I feel like it'll get nasty a little bit just because I will kind of have like, this chain of PRs that are kind of like, based off of each other. And, but if it must be done, it can be done. It might not be super, super easy. And with that, the community seems to be appearing. So I guess we can probably close out this meeting, and I'll see you all next week.
Yep. See ya.
All right. Bye.
You have to leave. You have to leave.
Hello, Francis.
Hello.
Hey, it's Veros. I'm just leaving. I was in the previous meeting, so.
I figured.
Good seeing you.
You stay, right?
You have to leave.
This is the community meeting.
You have to leave in order for the recording to end.
Ah, sorry.
Everyone has to leave.
All right.
Okay.
Everybody leave. Rejoin.
Oh no. Tristan.
We're unmuted, by the way.
Let's get started in about 3 minutes. Okay, so welcome everybody to the first Open Telemetry community meeting of 2020. Looks like we have a big crowd today, which is excellent. I'm also glad about that because we had moved the meeting times starting, I think, this meeting. So I'm glad everybody found the new calendar entry on the shared calendar. That's fantastic. Please add any items to the agenda if you want us to discuss them. I think there's already a couple topics there. And then we can get started. So the first topic on the agenda right now is an update on project status and a schedule for beta by KubeCon. I added this, so I suppose I should be the one to talk about it, but I think this will be a broader discussion with a few people chiming in. So I wanted to talk with all the attendees in this forum about whether we think we can make, what sort of release we'll be at by the time we hit the KubeCon conference. I know for a number of languages, things are a bit held up by specs. And I see Bogdan looking like he wants to speak. So, Bogdan, was there something you wanted to say?
No, I think one thing that we may want to chat is which languages you are proposing for going to beta, because I think there is no way we can go with all the languages, but I think we can probably maybe set up some of the projects, like let's say pick up a couple of languages and that we want to be beta, and then do that. Yep.
So we've typically considered like Go, Node, Java, Python, and I think .NET to be the sort of core languages, the languages that are generally in the best shape. Bogdan, I don't know if you have more insight into any of the ones beyond Java than I do. Which do you think is the furthest along?
Depends. I would say Python is very advanced. I know for sure. Chris just confirmed that. I think we should go with all five. Aim for all five.
Agreed. Yeah.
Maybe we should set up, if we really want to do something like this, maybe we should set up some kind of process thinking on these five languages that we are actually gonna get there.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking. So like what would that be? Is this like regular check-in and sort of program management of each of the languages, or is this something beyond that?
Something like that is fine. I think kind of a program management of this will be very good, and somebody taking a stab on pushing us to make sure we are doing it.
Okay. Chris, did you want to chime in at all?
No, I think a couple like Java, Python, JavaScript, and Go should all be ready to go.
Okay. Do you think, like, so given our current velocity, do you think it's realistic we hit those dates, or do we need to step in and do something special? My preference is to at least sort of just track these a little more aggressively than we have been thus far.
Yes, I think tracking them more aggressively will help definitely, and I think we lack on that. And to be honest, I think we should be ready with all these five, and maybe the agent collector as well as. Yeah.
Well, maybe it's worth talking about the collector now, but like the collector actually to me seems to be further ahead than most of the language libraries.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we're using it in production capacity.
Yeah.
I've been using it for months already.
Exactly. So I'm sort of less concerned about the collector because it's already being used in so many places.
Yeah, but in order to be called beta, I think the other thing that we need, Morgan, is every SIG maintainer put down a document of things that needs to be done in order to call beta. Things that can be tracked. So I think that's probably a good start. So who's gonna lead this effort? Maybe you can offer yourself to lead.
I'll take point for now. I'll get Ted and Jigger involved as well.
Yeah. Push every SIG maintainer to give you the list of things that needs to happen before calling beta.
Yep. Were there any other discussions that people want to have on the project's current status, our ability to hit beta by KubeCon, or anything related to that?
One quick question is, who's using, because we're at Postmates about to probably deploy the collector to production. It'd be good if I could say who's using it already in production.
We have been using it when we were Omniscient. We're now using it when we're Splunk.
And I can tell you that Google is using as well.
Yeah.
Let's say that I know some rumors about it.
Google's using it in production as well. Yeah.
We know many other end users who are using it too in production.
So, Tristan, you have a couple of companies that are using it.
So maybe related to that we wanted to, there is a Docker Hub account named OpenTelemetry, which we wanted to use to publish the Docker images.
Yeah.
And it now goes to Omnition account. We don't know who registered the account. Apparently Docker has a procedure for transferring the ownership if you have a registered trademark, which we do for OpenTelemetry. So I created a ticket with Docker Hub to do this, but got no replies. If anybody has a better channels to escalate this with Docker, we should do that.
We have a lead in our team who used to be their head of product. He might be able to escalate it. Can you add me to the ticket? Because he has connections at Docker.
I can forward you the ticket. I don't know if it's possible to add someone.
Yeah, forwarding is fine.
Yeah, but there is a procedure, so
okay.
It should be possible.
Yeah, other option is to host it maybe in things like GCP, create an OpenTelemetry account there. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can do that as well. I mean, there is currently a build image, which is built officially from our GitHub account, but it's named Omnition. It would be nicer to name it OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, I think Docker Hub is probably preferable to the Google Container Registry just because it's in Kubernetes. You don't have to like prefix it.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, has a better, I don't know if the Google one has like a public browsing interface like Docker Hub does. It's more for private images.
Yeah. So fine with Docker Hub. I think that's the right thing to do. Otherwise, maybe you can use Open-Telemetry.
You can't, because Docker Hub does not allow dashes in the names. Okay. I tried to do that. It doesn't work. No, just alphanumeric. Only alphanumeric.
Open
1982.
Okay.
OpenTelemetry Prime.
Okay, so I think we need to take care of that. Morgan, you're gonna help with this.
Yeah. I'll see what I can do with Bandwidth.
Okay.
Okay.
Next item.
So the next item on the agenda is the actual SIG updates, which we usually leave for last. So I'll just ask again, does anybody else have any topics they want to discuss today? Either focused on KubeCon and the beta release, or just generally other topics they want to talk about before we move to SIG updates?
I think it might be useful to talk about the prototypes that we're working on in each language, especially for metrics and context propagation, because we're doing this thing now where we have a OTAP, and then we have a couple prototypes for each of the OTAPs. And then we, hopefully by implementing the prototypes, we learn what kind of questions to raise in the OTAPs for when we write the spec. And then we use the spec to come back and write the actual implementation.
Yes.
But what I see happening now is that we are basically just merging the prototypes in and treating them as production code. So I'm just curious if other people in other SIGs, you guys are having the same experience, or if you think this is just how we ought to do this.
The experience that I have in Java, Carlos put together a prototype for context propagation. And what I asked him is what I would do all the time. I asked him to start splitting that into small pieces that are testable and easy to review and carefully review them. So I would suggest that you, as a SIG maintainer, you push hard on the author of that PR to split it into more reviewable and testable changes.
Okay, so even doing that though, what this means is that the implementation will be ahead of the spec. And so we see this now for context propagation, right? Where we have not written the spec yet, but we already have a bunch of production code that implements what we hope will be in the spec.
Yeah, that's probably something that the Lightstep people told us that they are pushing very hard this week to get out the specs for the context prop. Josh mentioned that yesterday in the specs meeting.
Yeah.
So I wish that that's going to happen. And I think, yes, correct, you are right that we should have pushed more harder on the specs, but and wait for that. I don't know. But I think probably we should wait for the specs to be written, unless you are committed to putting out the code and be willing to read the specs and make sure that the code is respecting the specs or an update later.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do that for each one of the clients before KubeCon. So
Yeah.
Morgan, to your point.
That's part of the action items that I mentioned to Morgan, that every SIG maintainer should have this. And one of the last item, and probably give us 2 weeks before KubeCon, would be make sure that we are in sync with specs before we announce beta.
Okay. So I've added that to the notes, and that's another action item for me, along with what I had before. All right, any other topics that people wanted to discuss? Okay, well, with that, we'll go into the SIG updates. So I'll give the SIG maintainers a few minutes to start filling in updates for their sections in the notes. So we'll give people like 1 minute to start writing those, and I'll slowly work our way through, and people who are filling in the SIGs close to the bottom can keep typing. So I recommend the people who work on the collector fill it in very quickly because you're up first.
Perhaps if that works.
I think you were muted for the half sentence.
I was muted. I can give the updates and later filling in the doc.
You can give the updates and I'll fill it in if you want.
Okay.
Okay, so basically, since the last community meeting, the changes were primarily making it even, I guess, readier for production usage. We have better coverage by tests, by end-to-end tests. We have build from the contrib version. We previously had the minimal version, the core version only. Now we have two official builds. Both are also available in Docker Hub. Feature-wise, we have 2 new components, the memory limiter and the Kubernetes tagging. I think that's primarily in terms of what we have new since the last time. That's it.
Okay. Next is specs. Bogdan, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. So for the specs so far, specs are not tabs. We merged the context propagation OTAP. We have to do the specs for that, as Chris mentioned. Then for metrics, I think we have all the OTAPs merged. We do lack a couple of specs, one being the observer metric. There are a couple of issues on the spec around metrics as well, including one that I filed to remove one of the instruments type. We do have a problem on the OTAP about global initialization, and that's probably something that people should start reviewing more aggressively and help us merging that.
Okay. Java. Who wants to speak about that?
I will do that.
Sure.
So we started to split and merge some of the context propagations, the non controversial changes, like renaming the distributed context to correlation context and a couple of other things like that.
Yep.
For metrics, we did. I already added that, by the way. It's the next item, but anyway. For metrics, we did a good progress. We have now all the instruments implemented, but we do not have the aggregations. That means probably another week of work. We started to add more tests and benchmarks. We have a couple of PRs around this. Yep. And probably that's about it for Java.
Okay. Trask, do you want to speak to Java auto instrumentation?
You can accept his update, by the way.
Oh, I know. I just did. I'm slowly going through. I just haven't accepted all of them yet.
Cool. Yeah, so we've finished basically moving everything over from Datadog, turning it into OpenTelemetry, writing to the instrumentation, goes through an internal agent API that now writes to the OpenTelemetry API.
Yep.
What we want to do is have the instrumentation write directly to the OpenTelemetry API.
Makes sense.
So that's what we're doing currently. And part of the goal of writing directly is we want to share instrumentation. We really want to share instrumentation between the auto instrumentation and the contrib, or share as much of that as we can,
yep.
Including and especially tests, so that we have consistency between the two. And we got a new contributor last week, yay.
Nice.
And it would be great to anybody who wants to join the project. Now is a great time. We have a lot of parallel work stream opportunities.
That's excellent.
Thank you.
All right, next is Node. Do we have anyone from the Node group? I think usually Mayor gives these, but I don't know if I see Mayor on the call. Nope, okay. I'll plus in Mayor and we can skip to the next one. Python. Chris, is that you?
Yep. Okay, so like some of the other SIGs, our big blocking issues are context propagation and metrics aggregation. We have 2 big PRs open for this now. Besides that, we just have a bunch of cleanup work to do, but we are largely on track to get this ready by March.
Excellent, thank you. Go, Rahul.
So histogram aggregation was recently added this week, and I think most of the aggregation are there for Go now. So metrics is pretty much complete except for the view specification, and
Okay.
I think that we need the spec for that as well. So respect to context propagation, the PR is there. I think it's still in progress. Hopefully we should have it ready for review this week.
Yep.
And waiting for Spec to identify all the beta requirements so that we can appropriately open issues and fix the missing gaps, basically.
Perfect. Ruby. Who wants to talk about Ruby? I see a few Ruby contributors in the call.
Is there more than one?
You're here. I thought I saw one of the Shopify folks. Although, you know what? I think it's because the Ruby SIG was right before this.
Yes.
Yes.
This is the extension of the Ruby SIG. That's why I'm here. Like, whenever our meeting bleeds together, I remember to come. So yeah, I filled out the doc, so I'll give the update.
Yep.
We have a gigantic context prop prototype PR. It's in flight and obviously getting updated as the spec work comes through. Metrics work is ongoing. That's the other really big chunk of work. Instrumentation conversion has kind of been a slow and steady process. SDK configuration is a headache, but there's some PRs to actually make that pretty easy. Reduces the number of lines of boilerplate you have to write to set up an SDK. And our README is woefully out of date, and I think this is true of not only Ruby, but some other SIGs. So we have a PR that brings that up to date and kind of threw out some estimates. So we're kind of just hashing out how we feel about those estimates, but soon our README will be a little bit more reasonable.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah.
All right, .NET, Sergey, I think I saw you on the call. Do you want to speak to that?
Yep. Hello. So .NET is doing okay. There is a big topic for us is how to converge with .NET team best, because .NET has some abstractions, OpenTelemetry has some abstractions, and we really want to marry them together. So we are discussing since we still have some opportunity to change OpenTelemetry API a little bit, specifically for .NET to specify better transition to future versions of .NET. And hopefully .NET 5 will bring even more goodness in terms of built-in functionality. So we keep working on that. It's kind of a big work stream for us. For the besides that, like we have some metrics work that we started, and we implemented some APIs, but they are not completed yet, and aggregations are also not ready. So we have only few of them. We have some interest to this metrics course, especially with like pivotal, like what is like Stilto, like with a Stilto integration. So they're actually looking for open telemetry, and they're waiting for us to deliver that. I hope we'll have some customers there. And besides, we just keep pushing towards 0.3 and beta.
Okay. Do we have anyone to speak about C++ and Rust? We usually don't.
I think C++ just added the first skeleton of the API. I saw a couple of classes added there. I don't know more details, but that's the only thing that I know.
Okay. Who do we usually have speak about Rust? I don't actually know. I'll check the maintainers list. Next is Erlang.
Yeah, today finally got merged in tracer provider stuff and registration and documented it. We were also had a very old README, but now it documents name tracers and how to use them, best practices, things like that.
Nice.
We have the metrics API ready to merge, but the SDK still has a good ways to go. But I mean, it's got basic stuff in there, counters and gauges and whatnot. Elixir API, so technically it works with Elixir, but to have an idiomatic Elixir API is still being discussed what's best there, but with a big PR and discussion that's coming along though, and I'm hoping to have something in the coming weeks.
Perfect. Normally we do a website update. I don't think we've done much work on the website recently. We were doing a lot before KubeCon US, and I'm guessing that'll pick up before KubeCon EU. All right, so that's it for the SIG check-ins. I can see that Sergey right now is adding additional topics. So Sergey, I'll let you start speaking to that.
Okay, so I just wanted to thank everybody for their submissions. We were asking people what can we do for KubeCon maintainers track, and there were interesting submissions. And as a result of the submission, we decided that Java auto instrumentation and collector work, especially combined, will represent community very well. So we decided to go with that submission. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. That sounds great. That's actually really exciting. Any other topics that people want to discuss? Okay. Well, that's a nice, short and sweet meeting, and it was great to get everybody's updates. So that wraps up our first community meeting of 2020, and I'll see you all on your SIGs or next month's community meeting. Talk to you later.
Bye.